So, that being said, I need to talk about some things that I just found out about recently. And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna repeat what I said in the other video that I just did. I'm not trying to criticize people. I'm not trying to name names. I will use one name, and it's only because it is so crucial to the context for this video that I can't not use that one name. Those who know the name will know exactly what I'm talking about. Those who don't, just use the context uh, to go from there. Anyway, I had a odd interaction on Twitter right before I was getting ready to go to sleep, and it concerned me after some other interactions I heard about earlier tonight. So I did a little digging, and I found out that there are people that had serious concerns about me being supported slash platformed slash however you want to put it, in light of things that happened back in April with mistakes that I made. For those of you who know, if you combine April, the month of April, with Raven, that's what we're talking about. I'm going to try to give context without giving a lot of personal information, and I don't know how well I'm going to be able to do this. This is not something I wanted to do publicly, but I think at this moment I need to try to set the record and hopefully this can help start a conversation to try to improve things. I don't think that there's much secret. I obviously, ideologically, I am not on the conservative side. I grew up in an evangelical house. My family is still very conservative. That's a reason why I've been essentially disowned by my family. I haven't talked to them in years. I have no support, nothing from them. I have no anticipation that I'd even be allowed at any of their funerals when they pass away. And I've had to, with all of those things, I've had to make peace with that years ago. That said, back in April, a protest happened at a particular location. Somebody was arrested on suspicion of a crime. When I found out about it, I looked at an article that Willamette Week had put out about the incident. They named a suspect, and because the work that I do, I do a lot of looking in court records. So I went into the OECI, the court system, and I looked at the record. I saw something that was very troubling to me. They had previously, in August of the year before, been arrested on a charge at a different protest, and the DA's office had declined to prosecute. They did what they call a no complaint. After the incident in April, they took the charges from the April allegations and combined the allegations from last August, saying that it established a pattern. That raised a ton of red flags for me, because of, that this ran completely counter to the idea of we're not prosecuting certain crimes. If the charge is only this, we're not going to prosecute it. What I saw was a completely different message. It was, we're not going to prosecute you now, but if you step out of line in the future, we will prosecute you for whatever you do then and what you already did. And that was like I said, it was a huge concern for me. And I wrote an article based on the information that I had. I wrote a series of tweets, trying to get out to the public what I felt was a very important topic. Unknowingly, that was my first mistake. What I didn't know was that the person involved had a name and pronoun choice that was different from what Willamette Week had reported. Willamette Week had reported based on official police and government records. I confirmed those records. One of the problems that we have with our current government is they don't care about preferred names. As a transgender person, I dealt with the risk for years of, what if something happens to me that I get charged for something and I'm going to be dead named. Thankfully, I was able to get help to get, once I lived in Oregon, I was able to get help to get my name changed, so that is less of a concern. Somebody could still dig up my former name and start throwing it around, but it doesn't have the same impact now that it would back then. So not long after I posted the article and the tweets, I started getting a lot of feedback. Complaints about me using the wrong name, using the wrong pronouns, that I needed to delete my information, all the stuff that I wrote immediately. And yes, I initially pushed back on it, and fairly hard. I don't like deleting my tweets. I personally feel like, I've seen a lot of times where people who have said things that they shouldn't have made mistakes, think that deleting their tweet will make the problem go away. I don't like that. I feel like if I delete a tweet, I'm trying to hide my mistake. I would rather have my mistake out there, own it, and try to learn from it. Of course, that belief doesn't take into account the person that I was referencing at the time. That is, one of many mistakes that I made at that time. another of the issues, like I said, at the time I didn't know anything that this person had a preferred name or pronoun. So, I had nothing to suggest to me that there was a disconnect between what I wrote and what the reality is. I was definitely more than happy to fix the article. I was part of the problem I was having was I was trying to figure out how to do it in a way to maintain the integrity of what I was writing while protecting the person's identity. They're protecting who they are. Part of the problem that came from that was more and more people were piling on, demanding that I delete the stuff right now. There was also a huge push at the time that nobody is saying this person's name. So at the time, I didn't even know what name, anything about what this person's preferred name was or pronoun. To this day, I only know what I presume is a first name. I don't know, is it a mono-name? Is it their last name? What are their preferred pronouns? I still actually don't know any of that, because of how strong the desire was from the community that was communicating with me to anonymize this person online. I started trying to research how to, from a journalistic standpoint, how to address a situation like this where a person's chosen name does not match what government paperwork says. I tried to use, AP style guide, internet searches, questions online. The problem that I had was basically everything that I saw discussed how to write about I'm not going to suggest what this person's how this person identifies as far as I will use myself as an example. I'll do it that way. AP style guide and web searches and everything have a lot of references about how to write about me if I'm the victim of a crime. They're very careful about using preferred pronouns, about not dead naming somebody. Use the preferred name. Having again, using myself as an example, having me as a suspect and having a different name, a different preferred name from my legal name, that seems to be a very edge case. And I think that, actually is backed up by the historical evidence that transgender people are more likely to face assault, intimidation, harassment, than they are to perpetrate those things. So it did kind of make sense that it would be easier to find how to treat a suspect or a victim in those situations than it would a suspect. I was still trying to sort it out, but with all the pressure I was getting, it was causing a lot of anxieties for me. I had tried to put out a call saying, please, I'm trying to address this. Give me some time. I'm dealing with a lot of issues right now that are making it that I can't process. The response was basically, we don't care. Do what we're saying. And At the time, that was something my mental state was not ready to accept. From a viewpoint view for me, if a right-wing person didn't like an article that I wrote because it put them in a bad light and they tried to demand that I would take it down, I would push back. I'd be willing to issue corrections to fix mistakes, factual errors, but to is take down an article because it makes somebody look bad and they're trying to harass, intimidate, or threaten me, that is not going to sit well with me. But at the same time, I didn't feel like... I felt like that same idea should be applied to left-leaning. So I reflexively pushed back against the idea of taking down an article because people on the left didn't like it. And again, at the time, and mental health disability may factor into it, I don't even know anymore. But that was not necessarily the best call. It did not provide, or it didn't take into account what could be happening to this other person. I ended up, at first, it got to the point I tried to protect my Twitter account, thinking I can at least mitigate the damage by restricting my tweets to only people who are already following me. Instead of all, however billion Twitter users there are, it's only the, 1,800 or whatever at the time that were following me that would be able to see this. But I quickly realized that's not really a short or a long-term answer. And I ended up shutting down my entire Twitter account for a few days. I also shut down... Well, I took my entire website offline and put up a static page, which I actually still have a copy of, to try to explain what I was dealing with, or what I was trying to process, and where my headspace was. I'm just going to go ahead and read it to kind of put some context as to where I was at the time. Likely this is not the page you expected to see. It's all I can do right now. The main site is offline and the Twitter has been deleted. I don't know yet if this is permanent or temporary. The site files are still safe, just the server is redirecting elsewhere. This all started with an article that I wrote that some people had problems with about how I wrote it, particularly naming an individual and apparently not using their preferred name and pronouns. I was trying to work out how to fix the article in a way that was accurate and in line with the journalistic code I'm working with. I was having a lot of issues getting information, especially in the edge case of where a suspect in a criminal case has a different legal name than their preferred name, like I just said. As a transgender person myself, I recognize the pain and anguish that can come from being dead-named in media, and that government records don't give a crap about that. But to not refer to the person by name at all, and then reference court documents, which has been a large part of my work, would have implied that the only name for them was their government name. That felt wrong to me. I was trying to determine how sources, like I said, like AP Stylebook would handle a circumstance like this, or asking for insight from others who are more knowledgeable in journalism. I was also trying to address how to not silence the voices of people who had responded to my original tweets about my errors, because personally I felt like deleting my bad tweets is hiding from my mistakes. Like it looks like I'm never wrong. Ideally, I would prefer to have them stay up so it can be seen that, yes, I fucked up here, and here's how I worked to fix it. Of course, deleting the whole Twitter handle, well, nuclear option detected. I get that people say I've done good stuff, but to be honest, it really doesn't feel like it. I've been investing tons of energy that I really don't have the spoons for. Look up spoon theory if you need to. And finances that I really don't have to maintain this work. And when I've looked at interactions on the site, only a tiny fraction of people come off of Twitter to look at the actual articles anyway. On top of being transgender, I'm also disabled. The, quote, pink walker is the obvious clue, but I also deal with normal PTSD, depression, anxiety cocktail that's becoming more and more common. The starts of that were from my time in the military, and they peaked about 8 years ago when I ended up hospitalized after several mental health breaks. Since then, I've gotten a lot of therapy and coping mechanisms in place, but they only work if I can access them. Tonight, the stress has piled up faster than I could process them. I tried to warn people I was hitting a limit, and I got pushed past that limit. Ended up having anxiety medications that I've been sitting on for years. Don't think I took since my first full night out documenting police shenanigans when the sacred fence was still up. The meds have kicked in, I'm safe, but I'm also feeling pretty hollow and lost, and I really don't know what to do going forward. Leave everything down or try again. Anyway, if you got this far, I have a personal Twitter that I don't plan on discussing work/protest related stuff on still, so I'm not totally removed from Twitter, just mostly. The site was down for a few days. I got feedback from some people talking about how they did appreciate the work that I was doing, and I tried to get some more insight. I came up with what I thought would be a decent plan to try to balance, to reference as little as possible the fact that the government has essentially an incorrect name for a person, so that I could still provide honest work and records while still providing respect to other people. After a few days, I thought, I felt like I could try to bring things back up again. I brought the website back up. The article that I wrote, I unpublished. It's still unpublished as of today. When I brought the Twitter back up, I went through, I copied down notes about the problematic tweets that I wrote, the responses to them, and then deleted the tweets. I was hoping to be able to address the issues, and then in such a way that I could bring the people that, by deleting the tweet, I basically, not only deleted what I said, but also what people underneath had said. And I wanted to be able to address my mistakes. Twitter, please give us an edit button. For Christ's sake, by now. But I wanted to be able to bring them back into the conversation without it seeming like I tried to sweep them under the rug too. Now, just maybe a month ago, I got rid of those notes because it has been 6 months since, and none of these topics ever had occasion to be brought back up with me. And eventually got to the point, it's like, why am I holding on to this? It's just, it was more work for me to keep that list than to, you know. I also went ahead and I wrote an editorial that I put up on the website to try to explain more about what had happened and what I was trying to do. I'm going to go ahead and read it again. This was something that I wrote. This was April 18th. And keep in mind, this is my headspace then. I would like to think that it's evolved a little bit since then. If you're reading this page, most likely you know that the entire Raindrop Works network was offline for a few days this week with a static front page with a letter from me trying to put some context into what had happened. Part of the time we were offline, I wasn't sure if I wanted to bring the site back online, if the work that I was doing was beneficial to the community in general. Several people did reach out to confirm that yes, they did appreciate the insight that I'd been providing, and it started becoming less of an if we would return as a media organization. Raindrop Works was originally built as a tech company, and this was a pivot post George Floyd. And more of a when. When was up in the air because I needed to work on sorting out a number of missteps that I took, particularly in regards to a specific article I had written that caused a backlash from a portion of the community. I wanted to be able to come back with the article already fixed. The police shooting Friday short-circuited the work that I was doing with others to sort that out. So, while it's not what I'd consider ideal, I have done a patch job of pulling down problematic things until we can properly fix it. At the core of the problem, I found 4 issues that I needed to address with the article. 1. I had accidentally misgendered the person in question. I had no idea, and it was a complete accident that is a very easy fix for me to do. 2. I had used the person's government name instead of their preferred name. Again, I had no idea, and I was more than happy to find a way to respectfully fix that issue. The one issue that I had was that documents that come from courts will always have the government name attached to them. I tried to research AP Stylebook for guidance on how to address what is admittedly a niche case. Transgender people, where my personal experience come from and how I used as a basis for research, are often victims of crime, and finding articles that address them as just parties in legal proceedings, whether criminal or civil, was very difficult. I think I've got a way to do it that gives me a good middle ground. 3. That I use the person's name at all. While I understand and acknowledge the people on the ground had decided not to use the person's name, that conversation seemed to happen after I had already published the article and was actually asleep. Journalists don't really like to write stories referencing a name without giving the audience an idea of who the person is. I only really need to use a name once to set the subject of the portion of the article, and then it's done. Additionally, as I mentioned before, we make use of court records and make them publicly available. With no name in the article to correct the government error, the only name referenced would be the incorrect name. And 4. The final issue was using the government name in a few tweets. I fully admit that in light of the other issues, as well as the fact that the only reason I wrote about them at all was not because of the allegations, but of what the DA was doing to them on top of it, I was hesitant to delete tweets off the bat for 2 reasons. First being, it personally felt like I'm trying to cover up my mistakes. I realized that in this case, it was about much more than my feelings. The second reason, which, if I knew the errors immediately, I could have deleted and reposted before anyone interacted, but there had been something of a conversation already. I didn't know how to address removing the tweets without silencing the conversations that were attached to them. Yes, with a bit of help and time, these were all things that could have been addressed. Unfortunately, the demands to fix it immediately, combined with not knowing how to fix it in a way that I felt comfortable with, triggered a massive anxiety attack in me. Anxiety is a normal thing for me, and I have decent coping skills, but the circumstances that night overwhelmed everything I had prepared. I couldn't work, and I was still dealing with demands to do it to protect the person. I never handle split-second decisions well, and in response, I tried to shut down the damage as safely as I could. I protected my timeline, but with well over 1,000 followers at the time, protected tweets don't really do much. So all I could do was the nuclear option of deactivating the whole account. I didn't know until the next day that the data actually still existed, which made me feel marginally better. I also redirected this site to a static page so that none of the information could be accessed, even by myself at the time. I fell back to an alternate account that I'd made previously to be able to vent about personal issues that didn't belong on Maine. And somehow I was seeing a different side of protest Twitter than I had before. People justifying the assault on a reporter at the scene of a murder at the hands of police. People saying he shouldn't have been assaulted, but other reporters were fair game. Reporters who had been accused of something almost a year ago that, when I looked at the claims, I didn't believe were accurate, but enough to blackball them to certain people, and with no new evidence or claims of wrongdoing. And the idea that members of a group of people who are opposed to violence at the hands of police seemed okay with, if not giddy, at the idea of inflicting police-like violence on people they don't like was a line too far for me. I'm not going to name names because I don't need to. Going forward, I'm making a few adjustments to our editing and processes here, as well as clarifying a few things. 1. Raindrop Works is not set up as protest journalism or racial justice journalism organization. It may have been in the beginning, but since I retired from on-the-ground reporting, our focus has shifted towards courtroom journalism, particularly with a focus on government accountability and transparency. That doesn't mean there won't be overlap with protest-related events or racial justice. Lawsuits against the city for excessive force alone can be a huge part of my work. But purely protest-related stories, I don't need to cover because others are already doing that, and far better than I can. 2. I will work to be more mindful of how individuals are portrayed in documents and articles. I've already made judicious use of redactions in the past, usually to protect victims of particular alleged crimes, but for the most part, everything that I get from court records can be accessed by anyone in the general public with a little bit of work. The court filings that I make available are meant to make access to the information easier. So while I will try to redact sensitive information, there are limits to how much I can do without making the documents useless. 3. As always, I'm more than happy to correct factual errors in articles. I often get leads for stories directly from court filings or from other outlets that may rush to be first to press and not get correct information. The likelihood of me completely deleting a story, especially because some people don't like it, is unlikely. Show me the errors, and I'll gladly address it. Of course, since Twitter doesn't allow for edits, that will be handled a little differently going forward. And number 4. Since, as I said before, I'm no longer doing protest journalism, I don't actually need to be observing all the protest chatter online like I have been, and even less reason to be paying attention to people who would be glad to see police violence be dispensed on other journalists. If you suddenly can't read my tweets, that might be why. You're still welcome to read my articles on the site, however. At that time, I did block some people who I had been particularly concerned about comments and I realized that, it wasn't useful for my work. It wasn't giving me, leads for things to work with. All it was going to do was cause extra frustration and stress for me. So, accept the things I can't change the things I can. And I could change the things I change by, changing what social media I'm ingesting. I still, this is how I felt in April. A lot of it still resonates. Some of the statements that I made in this letter, particularly about, other people, issues that were had with other journalists and things like that, I have also ended up deciding to take a step back from. I'm less likely to try to publicly support someone because I'm realizing, especially where I'm not as connected as I used to be, where my focus has shifted, I may not have good information to reach a decision. That said, I still have, and some people may see this as a failing, some people may see it as a good thing, but I have a lot of difficulty in, distrusting someone just because someone else told me to. I think that goes back to my upbringing in an evangelical church where, I was taught this is how you're supposed to think, this is what you're supposed to believe, and if you don't follow this path, you're going to hell. I got out of that, and I realized, for me personally, how wrong I could be in blindly taking someone else's word. So I try to observe for myself and use what I hear from other people to help form my view. And I've realized in some of these interpersonal issues, I do not have the information to be able to make calls one way or the other, and that's, I've decided to work to limit my interactions with interpersonal debates about, who's a problematic person or things like that. That is just a very, it feels like a pit trap of, or a minefield of balancing acts trying to address that, and I still don't know how to reconcile the idea of people that others say shouldn't be trusted with being able to see for myself why they shouldn't be trusted. That is one thing that I'm definitely still trying to find a balance with, and that's, again, that's part of why I'm trying to keep back from some of those things. It's not possible to do with everything, though. And especially, I mean, if concern somebody has about a person's personal actions intersecting with professional connections I may have. That's I still don't know how to work that particular issue. This is all coming up now, in part because of the trial coverage that I've been doing. It's... Yeah, I've joked that I'm getting my 15 minutes of fame right now because I've had easily 10 times the interaction on my media this week than I have at any other time ever. It's because I know that it's because I'm covering a story that is of such high interest, broadcasting this trial stream. And I know that after the trial is done, that's all going to go away. I'm going to go back to, low key, unless I happen to cover something again that's of the right public interest. And that's fine. I'm not trying to do this for fame or glory or anything. I'm trying to do this to help, demystify some of the legal stuff that we have. I'm trying to help provide context, and maybe people will be able to use that to see how the system can be fixed. Personally, I'm not so much of the destroy everything mentality. I get that there are plenty of people that are. But maybe if the work that I do is able to show somebody, this thing here is a good thing to keep in whatever comes after this, or this is something that definitely needs to go away. If I can help people get that better understanding of what we have now, that's something that would completely validate the work that I've been doing. It's for all of us. It's bigger than any one person or any one group. It's everyone. That being said, I'm hoping, and this went on a lot longer than I had hoped that it would. I'm hoping that I've given a good understanding of what I perceived as what happened in April, how I responded to it, how I poorly responded to it. And while there was a mental health and disability aspect to it, I'm not going to say that was a justification. I will say, though, that this was a chance for a learning opportunity. I didn't get the chance to learn as much from it as I'd hoped to, because of the problems with being able to get feedback with everything that happened after. But that doesn't mean that still can't happen. I really hope that this gives me a chance to have a conversation, to maybe, figure out what I can still do to to be able to do what I'm doing best while being respectful of everyone else and stepping on as few toes as possible. But I can't work in a vacuum. I need to have feedback and conversations with people to be able to understand their viewpoints. I'm not even saying that it needs to be with the person that my writing started in April started this whole issue. I still know next to nothing about them, and I'm not trying to push for any of that. If they want to reach out, I would definitely welcome it. But at this point, my request for help is more to the community in general. That being said, I did come across comments made tonight by some people who are still very mindful of what I did back in April and are still committed to holding that against me. I wish that wasn't the case, but I know that you can't force somebody to forgive you. You can't force absolution. And I'm not going to ask that these people suddenly, stop their distrust of me and let me back into that circle. So that being said, some people responded to the comments about, it was basically, have we forgotten what Heather did back in April that was so wrong? And some people have some people didn't know anything about it. I've tried to help provide some context and maybe it will help, maybe not. Maybe me responding is just going to push people further away, and I can only do what I can do. I can't make other people respond how I want them to respond. Though if there are still people, or even people watching this, if there are people that decide they don't want to support me, that if there are people that have supported me and, especially financially these last few weeks and they now regret it, I can, work on reversing that. I'm not going to complain or criticize if people decide that, Monday when the stream comes back up for the trial, if a bunch of people are suddenly not there. I hope that they find another source to be able to watch the trial, whether it's through some other streamer or through the courthouse directly. I want people to be able to see the information. If I can help with that, I'm glad to. At this point, I would love to be able to start that conversation. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, it is what it is. And that's... I feel like there's more that I should say, but it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I've got an alarm going off in 4 hours, and I was not planning. I was planning on going to sleep hours ago. I don't know the best way to go forward. If there is one, so I think I'm just going to put this out into the world as it is. Thank you for sticking with me this long, and hopefully we can talk again soon. Have a good day, everyone.